Can we quote you?
Okay.
All right, I think we can go ahead. Want to thank you all for coming. This is the second of the series of Let's Talk, and this is for the building inspections. My name is Mick Johnson. I'm a trustee, and this is Michelle Madison. She is as well as a trustee. We also have Brent Ferguson. Is that on live feed or YouTube?
On YouTube.
On YouTube. She's a town administrator. So what we're trying to do here is, we have no agenda. We're just here to talk about what's going right, what's going wrong with our building inspection process. So, if you would sign in. Well,
No, I'm not looking for circulation.
that's a good idea for other people who might want to come in as well. So when speaking, please pull your mask down, give us your name, what company you're representing, or if you're yourself, that's fine. But again, no agenda. It's just open forum for constructive, constant talk. So with that, does anyone have anything they want to get us going? There we go.
I'm not sure, my name's Jordan, but I've been having some real problems with that down here, and it's been almost 9 months now. And one of the problems is he made telephone calls to find out where I got my inspection done. Well, there's only so many Colorado inspection people. And he charged $50 per call. And it turned out to be $300, another $50 for something. He was charging me up and above what the inspection cost was. And when he left my house, he said, "Oh, Jimmy inspected your house." I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, well, I've been in for a very long time." I called him. So whatever he stuck, whatever those charges were, he told me he was trying to find out who inspected my house. Anyway, way too expensive for something that wasn't my fault or anything to do with me, because I had it inspected. Number two, I believe he's a consultant hired by an independent consultant. Is that true? Contractor? So that means we have the option of hiring our own contractor. Is that correct? Since you guys hired him, he's an independent contractor, so we can decide whether we want to have him as independent contractor for us. Is that?
No, it really has to go through the town.
Well, I understand that. That's what I'm saying. Why don't we have somebody who we hire from town? Well, at least this facility that are just trying to, I don't know, I don't understand why we have some company in Denver representing us here in Greenland.
Well, the quick answer to that is we don't have enough inspections to keep someone employed full-time.
But do we have to get someone full-time? Why can't we get a contractor like the guy who does Cedar Ridge and Hotchkiss and hire him?
And see, we're looking at different things like that.
All right.
Thank you.
Suzanne Watson. And I do want to say Hotchkiss recently lost their building inspector. They were following the 2003 code and they updated to the 2018, and I don't know what the story is, but the inspector didn't want to relearn the code. And so they hired Bruce, the building inspector, that inspects Cedar Ridge or City, Delta, and now he's in Hotchkiss. And I don't know what they pay him an hour. I believe Dan Reardon is getting $120 an hour. And the problem I have is, I know he's contracted as an independent contractor, but I think you have an obligation to try to find something that's the most reasonable for the townspeople, especially when you require them to use his inspection services. Because he might be affordable to the people who are new here and are moving in with a bucket of money, but there are a lot of older folks on fixed incomes that might need to repair a roof, or might need to, and then a number of, like plans he's requiring from people are, and then he charges them with fees. And my understanding is when you start a project, you're not going to know what the costs are up front because he comes up with stuff. The concern I have also is if you look at our town building, our town municipal code, and the building department section, and it says under fees, it says fees shall be established, the ordinance says fees shall be established by resolution. You can't establish a fee by resolution. You can set the amount by resolution, but the actual fee has to be a law. It has to be something that is, it's a law that backs up the amount that you set by resolution. And I think our code is actually faulty. And I'm not sure there's anything that really enables him to be charging these fees. I don't know. So my question is, what actually is the framework that makes his fees legal, that you can actually stick us with them? Okay.
So, if I may, with that question, and Dorian has yours as well, I just want to say that we may not have many answers today. We're likely not going to have many answers today. Our real goal today is to get information, get all of your questions and all of your feedback about how the process is working so that we can find those answers. So, Suzanne, specifically to your question,
Yeah.
I can't answer that.
Oh, I'm not asking for answers now. I'm just putting it on so you can put it on your list.
Other than, there is a building fee formula and everything
Yeah.
online, so, the fees are.
Can I show you something on that, Mitch? Can I show you something? Okay, this is a resolution. The town trustees never saw this when these fees were, it used to be part of an ordinance that was adopted in 2006. It was actually an attachment to an ordinance that was adopted. But the whole code was re-adopted, and this was not put in the code. So, I understand that there's a table, but you can't just put these other inspections and fees at the bottom, because these change depending on, they mysteriously change from year to year. You can't have someone just changing fees in the office, just administratively. It's not legal. So this has to be examined, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we're.
Okay, I don't need to sound like I'm attacking you or not.
No.
But it's true. I don't even know what you're saying.
No,
Because come up willy-nilly with things and charge people.
I'm not taking it personally, and please speak your mind, all of you, so.
So, this is Paige Smith, and can I just compare what you just held up?
Sure.
Okay, this is the same thing. You cannot find this on the city's webpage now. This has been eliminated. The fee structure is much different. There's about a 3-page rolling fee structure for permits. And I wanted to mention that there is no place where you can see where an inspector would charge for their time. That is at the bottom of this one that you have, Nick, but this is not anywhere to be found on the webpage any longer. And this came up a couple years ago. There was a discrepancy when the resolution was adopted, or the ordinance. So I just would like, if you could make sure that what is on the town's website is what you all are following. And then secondarily, there are 2 places on the website where there are building permit applications that are different. So I urge you to talk with the staff about getting the one you really want people to use as the only one available. And it just depends on what drop-down menu you go to.
Inspections outside, no.
Thanks for that.
Thanks.
The town website is
Yeah.
undergoing changes right now, they're updating.
Yeah.
It'll be a very different website
Yeah.
in the near future.
I figure that's probably part of what's going on, but in the meantime, I think there could be some confusion.
Appreciate that.
And the newer one that does reflect Dan Rear being the contract inspector, it has a place at the bottom where you would estimate what it's going to cost you to build your, whatever you're doing. But there's a second entry for his time, what you are spending for his time, but there's no place that says how much his time costs. I could not find that anywhere on the webpage. So, just as an FYI, thanks.
Thank you.
Are you inspectors supposed to be free? I want to pay for a permit and then the inspection is free.
They used to be.
Yeah.
I thought it was.
So there are fees related to acceptance time beyond the standard.
Oh, so that's why he's charging for other things.
What constitutes time beyond, no?
Yeah.
I'll have to look that up and
Okay.
get back to you on the actual information.
Yeah, we don't know if there's a certain amount of time built in per the permit.
I think
If you go over that,
would be interested in knowing that.
yeah, that's something that we'll definitely find out.
We'll get
James
into that.
Sorensen, speaking of excessive though, I have a contractor who unfortunately couldn't make it. 6x8 porch, existing, $600 in fees and permits. 2 plan reviews and engineer drawings for a 6x8 porch. That's excessive.
Yeah.
That is beyond excessive. I have another citizen who is building a 12x14 deck. She's at $600 and has it finished in fees and permits. I figured both of theirs based on diversity structure, which includes plan review, they charge 50% of the total, $35 initial up to $25,000 would definitely would have included both of these. 6x8 porch would have been at $88.50, and 12x14 deck would have been at $179. So these fees are insane. And I don't think the money goes to County. I think it goes to Denver or Longmont or Denver doesn't live here or shop here or pay taxes here. So where is the benefit to the town?
Exactly.
Yep, exactly.
Did you get that?
Oh, yeah. We're getting it all.
We're taking those in the meeting and being live streamed, so it will be available on YouTube as well.
Your bullet points talk about what is working about the building department. I really don't think there's one thing working for the citizens about this system. Not one thing. The decisions are arbitrary. The fees are all over the place. And quite frankly, people are afraid of our building inspector. That should not be the case. He should be here to educate, to inform, but right now it seems punitive and arbitrary.
I definitely agree. I mean,
Well, particularly for a rural community, $50.
Yes, but for any community.
Well, it's even compounded.
Yeah.
In a small town.
there's a contractor that mentioned to me, he said, I can't afford to do work in town anymore.
Or won't.
The problem is they won't.
Yeah.
Because of these fees, and that's why we're having this meeting.
And it's not just the fees, it's not just the fees, it's the unreasonable expectations. These houses were built by coal miners and farmers. And I don't mean to disparage farmers and coal miners at all, but they stood for 100 years.
Yep.
And to bring them to the level of the 2018 building code, it's not reasonable. Applying the 2018 International Building Code is like trying to fly a World War I biplane using the Space Shuttle Operations Manual. You might get it off the ground, but it's not going to go well.
And are you saying that Mr. Reardon refers to the 2018 building code when he does this?
He's supposed to be,
No, he's not. He's supposed to be using 2003 because that's what the town has adopted.
We haven't adopted.
So, yeah, so, and if maybe the town is discussing, going for the newer code, I don't know, but just for edification, that's what's,
Well, even the 2003 compared to these houses built in 1850 by a farmer, and I don't mean very farmers, I'm not. But these guys weren't carpenters, there was no code.
I have been told by Dan that I need to meet the 2018 code.
No, we haven't
Yeah.
adopted it yet.
you did.
We haven't adopted it yet, so you don't have to. We're still following the 2003 code, so that's
But go
not.
ahead and don't do that and see what happens.
Yeah. There's been a lot of talk about it.
Hi, I'm Debbie, and thank you, Debbie, for everyone, if I could just give the reminder, you can state your name when you speak for the, mainly for the live streaming record.
The concern is, what if they don't feel comfortable stating their name if they have an ongoing project and fear repercussions from the building inspector? There you go.
That's a
Yeah.
valid question.
State your name if you'd like to. How's that? You know, this is just a open forum, you know, for discussion, so, you know, whatever you feel comfortable saying or, you know.
Hi, I'm Debbie Kimball. I'm a real estate broker here in town, and so I'm dealing with the buyers that are buying the houses and that are dealing with it. I think the one thing that I'm hearing that we're really lacking is any kind of consistency, and we've had so many changes, and so you don't know how, there should be a set pattern, there should be set price, and there should be something that's solid that's not as random. And we should know if we're working in 2008 or 2000. I mean, no one knows what's going on here, and that's a hard thing, especially now we have people moving in from the big cities, and dealing with this, it's difficult. There's definitely a lack of professionals. I think there needs to be something. This needs to be something that is more black and white, more solid, a lot less random. Because, you know, going through different inspectors, as I have for 6 years, you know, rules have changed, things have changed, you know, we've gone from this to this. If we could just come with something solid that makes sense, and keep that for a little bit, like maybe a couple of years, like stick with 2018 for a while, and that's just my opinion. It just changes, all the changes, no one knows what else is going on. You don't know how to advise, because
Exactly. But again, that's why we want your input. We'll, you know, get some answers. We'll have something on the website. The trustees will discuss, you know, what code we need to go by.
Yeah, he made some really unreasonable requests of me. He came to inspect a furnace that came with the 2020 house. They had sent the wrong furnace, so they sent the furnace that was supposed to come in, and I had it put in, and I
Give a manufacturer on that.
a manufactured home.
Yeah,
When you
your
find it,
manufacturer says rules.
brand new, you know, I did everything, everything else that he had told me to. He comes to the house 2 months ago to inspect the furnace and tells me that I have to get a ladder for him to get up onto the roof. I have to make an appointment with the electrician and plumber at the same time that he can be there, so that they can go over and look at what has to do with the furnace to make sure the furnace is installed correctly. And I called the plumber, Sean Lamount. He goes, no, I don't have time for that, and you don't have to get him a ladder. He needs his own ladder. He can go up into the crawl space himself. That's what inspectors are supposed to be doing, and do it himself. So I have not I wrote a letter in the town, more than half of it that I wrote, and I haven't put it in. But things of that sort, and then on the one hand he's blah, 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 and the next hand he's just full of, I'm sorry, he's a liar. And he misdirects things, and he says things that aren't, you don't say to an older woman, period. And I'm sorry, but it upsets me, and I don't like it. I don't want him coming into my home or anywhere around me again.
Thank you. James?
Kind of to touch on what Dorian was talking about. If you're a contractor to wait for an inspection and then he has to arrange with the plumber, you've got a schedule to run. And you've got other people scheduled. I mean, if you need an inspection and it's called for this date, that's when it needs to be, and it needs to be right there. You know, we're all expected to show up at a certain time to do certain things and we do it. And very few of us, I think, make $120 an hour.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that this town has a real big problem with the building inspection and zoning enforcement in general. I'll give you my particular case most recently. I had a neighbor who was issued a building permit for an addition, and the zoning code is very clear that when additions are made to an existing property that doesn't comply with zoning, that property, at the time the addition is made, needs to comply with setbacks. And I pointed out that this was not being done to the building inspector, and he eventually refused to deal with me anymore. He said I was unreasonable. The upshot was that he allowed this addition, the permit was for an addition, to be built on top of the sewer line. Okay? And so now my neighbor's wall is on the alley, and I don't fault my neighbor for this. It's your job to get away with what you can. The town let this happen. So the neighbor built their addition on top of the sewer line, and now if the town has trouble with that sewer line, they're going to dig a hole through my driveway. Okay? And just the whole thing of the building inspection in this town is ridiculous. We live in a county that has no building code at all. We've got a town that's full of 100-year-old buildings. The modern building code just doesn't apply. And now we're talking about going to the 2018 code. I think it's crazy. It sets up a situation where you've just got guaranteed inequities, because you're going to hold somebody to one standard, and then if there's somebody that has a building that just doesn't apply, and you're going to try to apply it to them. You're driving people underground, you're setting up, you're pitting neighbors against neighbors. And the building inspector's contract says that he is responsible for certain portions of the zoning code. And that's where I fault him with not being aware of or enforcing the code with my neighbor. That's why we have setbacks and codes, to keep neighbors from going at each other. This case wound up in court. It cost us both a lot of money, and neither one of us is satisfied with the outcome. Okay? We need to get this town tuned up to where there's somebody that understands these codes, and we either apply them or we'll come over and get rid of it, because it's screwed up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Suzanne Watson. I just want to say, if you look at the 2003 code, and it will be the same in the 2018 code, it says the building inspector is appointed by the chief appointing authority of the jurisdiction. That's the council. You know, he should be answering to the council. It's not a simple hire by the town administrator. So, in a way, he can work with a little bit of autonomy, because he's enforcing this code, that's the law, and he shouldn't be subject to like pressure, saying, well, let this guy off the hook because we need to get this business approved, and I'll do an inspection and you stay out of it. You know, we can't, I think there needs to be more checks and balances. And when he answers to the council, it means he's answering more directly to the people, because you're elected officials, and so I don't know. I think they approved the contract, but the contract is not an appointment. Appointment is, if it's an appointed official and he takes an office, usually there's an oath of office that you have to take, and you swear to uphold the laws and whatever. But anyway, that's a technicality, a little off the weeds maybe. But I just don't feel like we've adopted this code, and we're all supposed to follow it as homeowners, but we're kind of not following it as a town. You know, there's something about how the I want to repeat myself also on the, we have a lot of old houses in this town. You know, if you scare people away from fixing things up, I mean, number one, they go underground, and there's a lot of unsafe and illegal work that can happen. But number two, you're going to see kind of a decline of the town when people don't feel like they can replace this or upgrade this because they're kind of going to get into headaches. I think the building department is something that we should be encouraging people to involve in the process. And I know there are people who think it should be entirely self-supporting, but, you know, is that really the best idea? I mean, is it supposed to be a business unto itself, or is it a service? Is it something that we're doing it for the betterment of the community, and there is a bit of a government, you know, takes a little bit of a hit. I mean, we all pay taxes to you guys, I mean, to the town, and it covers services. But, and then also, just, I said this before, it didn't used to be this way 20 years ago, but now when you buy a building permit, it turns into the tax assessor in the end. So over time, the assessed values of houses will go up if people are pulling building permits, and the town ultimately benefits from that. It's not an immediate benefit that you get. I mean, you know, taxes what take a 2-year cycle to raise, but you do ultimately get taxes from higher property values. So that's a long-term way that building permits actually come back to the town.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good points. Yes.
Matt, I agree with a lot of the criticisms and complaints about the building inspector and his role, and I also realize that he is in a position of liability for a lot of decisions people are making regarding buildings, and it seems like it really is a tough spot for somebody to be in to try to uphold the code and to try to also be in a position of being lenient with these old buildings, but then if the place catches on fire or collapses or something happens to somebody because he's been lenient, then he's on the hook for all this stuff.
He's
exempt.
down.
He's totally exempt.
The building code says that.
Delegate on.
As long as it's not with malice. Well, the building code actually says that he's exempt unless it's with malice. Anything.
I didn't expect something that had a health program to even get sued.
What?
Well, let's not try it.
That doesn't happen, he inspected it, see who's liable, he's liable.
He's not.
Yes, he
Read
is.
the code.
Read the code.
Just look at the code, it's the law.
I just feel like I can see that it's a difficult spot to be in, and I think that we could easily end up in a position in a town where nobody's gonna wanna take this job. I certainly.
I have a question.
Go ahead, I want you to pay. Question number 8.
I want to put it like this, and I really like to put, you know, wood fence up. It's just a comment, basically, but if I took that money, well, right now I can only afford, and I can afford it, but then I can't afford if I have to go pay $1 million to put up a wooden fence, a 6-foot fence versus a chain link fence, which I can put up. So, which is more aesthetically pleasing? Would it be the chain link fence, or would it be the wood fence? I mean, you have to look at the quality of what is being done and what materials are being used. And these are the things that we want to be able to have for ourselves, but it makes it difficult when you're putting out money for something that is in the air that hasn't even, he's like $350 out the window to me for something that was absolutely, I'm trying to say it. I believe that if we had less money problems with the inspections, then we have more ability to do a better job and a quality job on whatever it is that we're doing without having to say, okay, well now I've got to put $600, like you said, you know, to away, and that $600 could go into really making something fine.
Thank you. James?
There are also, and it may have helped alleviate getting to this point, there's no arbitration. Who do you go to when you have a problem with the building inspector in there?
tell them this, and equally, so how long would you have to wait?
Yeah. So in the meantime, your project is on hold for something you felt was unreasonable, or it may not be, but there's no accountability and no arbitration.
The Board of Appeals that we don't have.
Then we don't get, yeah.
Yes. Kind of along that line, I have a suggestion. I think that as an individual, I should be able to hire any certified building inspector that I choose to deal with to inspect a project that I might have. I think this would be a benefit to the town, because as it is, the last time I checked, the building inspector collected approximately $25,000 from the community over the year, and also billed the town another $25,000 for it. So in other words, he got paid 50 grand. 50 half from the town from the community. I think it's absurdly expensive. And I think, well, anyway, but I think we should be able to hire our own building inspector.
North Carolina is doing exactly that.
And you know, you're not going to have any worse result, that's for sure.
Good point, thank you. Yes.
I'm Gary Hall, private homeowner. Back in October, this sort of runs the gamut of all the things we've discussed so far today. I contracted with a builder in the valley to tear down and rebuild one of my two outbuildings. My house was built in 1913, and it had two buildings at the alley, right up against the property line, alley line. And I redid one, I had it torn down, and of course it was set back because I ended up building a slightly larger facility. The other one is, the outside square footage was 195 square feet, so it's under 200. I talked to a number of builders, including the fellow that ended up doing the work. They all concurred that I could tear it down and rebuild it without any setbacks. And just to make sure, one day I had other business with Dan at another property, and we were across the alley from that very building that I was planning on tearing down. And I mentioned to him that what my intent was, and I said, I've heard that I can rebuild in place without a 10-foot setback from the alley and a 6-foot from the property line adjacent. And he said, absolutely, it's under 200 square feet. He actually went over to inspect the interior because he wanted to see if there could be, anything could be salvaged. And so he pointed out some potential issues, none of which ended up being anything. Long story short, I hired a builder. He put together an estimate of cost, he submitted his plans for a permit, and I got an email that was sent out to Corinne, to the builder and myself, from Dan, indicating that and I don't know if he was waffling between the two codes, but suddenly he sends this email saying that no matter what the dimension of the existing building, all of them are disavowed from being rebuilt in that location, that they had to be set back. And I didn't say anything at the time to Dan because, for the very reason that he's the building inspector and I don't want to add grief to my predicament. So I kept my mouth shut, thinking, okay, when this is all over, I'll find an opportunity to bring it up. Long story short, the setback would have put the new building right on top of the gas line, which of course is not allowed. I mentioned it, I contacted Dan about that. And I'll be frank, he had the audacity to tell me to find out how much it would cost to move the gas line. And so I contacted Black Hills and scheduled to have them come out and make a determination. Well, in the meantime, I measured the gas line length from the meter at the house out to the center of the alley, just to make certain, and then determine what distance it would have to be shifted laterally to accommodate the setback in the building. And they called me to set up an appointment, and I said, we may be able to do this over the phone. I gave him my dimensions. He said, well, I can tell you right off the bat, minimum. And he said, this is very modest, but minimally $1,000. And I told the builder, I said, well, what's the answer? We'll pay for it. It's not happening. And so at that point, my builder suggested, he looked over the building, he said, I can renovate this. The problem was the original building was constructed on a very narrow concrete ridge that followed the perimeter of the structure. I wanted a slab. And he said he felt confident he could reinforce that building, raise it, put a slab underneath, and drop it down. Well, I had already gotten some of the materials for tearing it down completely once Dan told me I could do that. So what ended up happening was he renovated in place, and I have a stack of siding that was left unused because we could not use that under the confines of renovation. An additional point is that because I paid the builder to submit the initial plans, and then paid him to submit the other plans afterwards, by the time it was done, I paid to the nose for a building permit. The end result is that building is exactly, today, it's exactly where Dan told me I couldn't have it. And when I looked at the figures for tearing it down versus renovating, by the time I paid for all the additional costs, it was a draw.
How many square feet?
195.
You don't need to get a permit for that. When you look at buildings, it doesn't have permits, and the code that says anything under 200 feet doesn't require a permit.
Don't tell me, tell them.
So, I mean, it's things like that. I do want to say, sometimes with the setbacks that we're talking about, we have our town land use code. It's in chapter 16 now, and it talks about the setbacks. Something that's a little confusing that I heard Dan making mistakes with, but a part of it is because the code is separated a little funny. But if you go to accessory structures, buildings and uses, the setback requirements for buildings on the rear half of your property are different. So it says it's not a 10-foot setback from the rear alley, it's like 5 feet if it's an accessory structure. And there are two different parts in the code that talk about rear yard setbacks, and usually he's going with the 10-foot one from what I heard.
Because this was not a main building.
Yeah, so it's in our code. So I was almost thinking, when I moved here, I kind of had a similar experience, and a lot of it wasn't Dan Raymond, that was from my ignorance of what our code is. And I wasn't able to stand up for myself. But I wish there was a way of taking some of that important setback information and making a chart that when a homeowner wants to come for a permit, they're given accurate information, that we check and double check to make sure that they're getting the right information. So they have a little pamphlet or a booklet about what you can do, and it would be a really friendly maybe way of addressing that.
So what is, he told me, I took down my garage, which is 22 foot by 17 foot, and the concrete that it was on is right up onto the line, the line between below. So he said, oh, you can build another structure, since you took the structure off that, you can stick another structure on there. So what is that, can I or can't I? Now I don't know. One person told me there was something I can.
Yeah. Thanks.
So how soon can we expect some sort of resolution to these problems? It took out the one meeting.
can guarantee it's gonna take more than one meeting.
What?
Well,
Well, he lost his temper at the Delta meeting and it was easy to do something, apparently.
It took us 2 years to get rid of Ken White. Were you gonna go through this again?
You're invited money to die. No way. You're in budget season right now, so it's like an appropriate time to look at what the costs are that you're spending. And I would, advise you to look at the communities around us and see where we are in, how we compare to the costs of construction and building permits and building inspectors, because if we're way out of line, why would you want to move into Paonia? And I would highly recommend talking to Sealedge and this Bruce guy. He deals with several towns around here.
I'm sure we'll see you later.
well, that's one of the reasons why we can't do it overnight. Yeah, but go ahead.
So just to speak a little bit to that, James, I don't expect we'll be able to resolve everything in one meeting because we're going to do a lot.
Well, it's a lot, yeah, but there's one immediate problem that could be resolved fairly quickly.
So that's part of the reason why we're having this conversation now. We are entering budget season. We were talking with Cindy about it today at our normal committee meeting. What comes out of this meeting will go to the board. We're hoping to take some solid recommendations back to the board that can be considered during budget season.
What is the contract with Colorado Code Consulting? I mean, is it, at will? Do they have a yearly contract? I mean, how soon does that term have to be terminated?
I believe it's an annual contract, and I think we can confirm that with Brent.
And when is it up for renewal?
I believe it's in. Again, I don't want to say that with 100%
Right.
certainty until I talk to staff and confirm,
Yeah.
but I believe it's an annual contract.
Good.
that renews.
James, for everybody here, why don't you specify exactly what issue you want to resolve? When you're talking about that.
Well, basically, the issue is just reading here and over is that Colorado Code Consulting is a square peg in a round hole, and they need to go, and we need to do something different. Perhaps in-house, perhaps shared with what Colorado Code Consulting and Andrew and I are working in town.
I'm not positive of this, but it's very common for contracts of this sort with the town to have a clause that it can be changed at any time by either party or by mutual agreement.
Right.
I would like to remind everybody, I'm pretty sure everybody here has interaction with Dave Coleman. So I have pretty strong feelings about Dave in a negative sense, so I don't want to get too deep about it, but basically, there are, the next guy might not be better. The last guy wasn't, right? The last guy was, in my opinion, way worse. And Dan's not perfect. I've had interacted with him several times on a couple of my projects, but it seems like my biggest beef with him is that he's distant and overpriced. Basically, like, he seems kind of arbitrary as to what he wants me to do, and so far he hasn't been overbearing for me, but I can totally understand him to get it back. I'm sorry, like, that's terrible. There's some terrible stories coming like here, and I just think that, keep in mind, it could be way worse, it has been way worse.
Could we ask for references though, like if the building inspector who inspects some local towns, surely we could get some feedback. But Dave Coleman, another part of the problem is the town fell down on its duties. If you look at the qualifications for the building inspector, you're supposed to be trained within 6 months. There are certain qualifications that we didn't follow up on. And so in a way, I think he might have been a little over his head, but he only earned $15 an hour. So between 15 and 120, is there some kind of a happy medium we can find?
Hopefully that is the case.
Yeah.
And if I could remind you, when you speak, if you would state your name, I would appreciate that. Yes.
Bill Brunner's money. So that's another really good point, is that there needs to be oversight. And that's something that this town has fallen down on consistently for a long time. I mean, if there was any kind of oversight at all, Coleman would have been gone from the get-go. I mean, he was bizarre, he was basically corrupt. And he was hired by a manager who was out to lunch, and these things are just ignored. And if you look back over our history of the last several years, there's been really bad hires, and nobody will wake up to it. People that try to wake up to it get attacked. So, I don't know what to do.
I would second that, Christina Patterson, for oversight. Like, isn't it time for Paonia to have like good people in positions? Like, why are we settling? Why are we settling for horrible managers? Why are we settling for horrible code enforcers? Like, it is time to have decent people in positions of power, period.
Honest, hardworking, good-hearted people.
So thank you for having this meeting and beginning the process.
Yeah, we do appreciate you being a sounding board.
Yeah. My name's Leonard Williams, I own Farmhouse Properties. I've bought 15 or 16 houses in Paonia in the last 10 or 12 years, flipped them or rented them. Of those 15, 16 houses, none of them met code. Most of them weren't even close. After I got done with them, they still don't meet codes. I've worked with Mark Sprinkle, Dave Coleman, I'm both great to work with. You can talk to him, you can get stuff done. Dan Reardon, I've worked with him several times. He's very stickler for the law. Doesn't matter what you do, how much money you make, what you're doing, it's going to be exactly what it says it's going to be. And he was strictly by the book. He's not easy to work with. I'm not a contractor, I'm an old coal miner that picked up a hobby to do something because I had no money to spend. But that being said, a lot of times I won't buy a house in Paonia because I don't want to deal with the crap. You know, if I'm going to spend $250,000 trying to fix a house up to sell, I don't want it to cost me time and money. The biggest thing for me is the time things. I only come on Tuesdays, I only come on Thursdays. You know, I need to keep moving. I've got employees, they need to eat, they got payments to make, I need to keep moving. Electrical inspector comes on Tuesdays, Thursdays. Plumbing inspector comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you fail an inspection on a Thursday, you can't do anything for the next Tuesday that gets inspected again. You got a real serious issue with housing problems in Paonia. The people that are working in Paonia, working at the lumber store, working at Don's Market, working at the post office, cannot afford to rent a house in Paonia. My wife's phone rings off the wall. You have anything for rent Paonia for $600 or $800? Got 5 or 6 rentals, none of them are $600 or $800. Because you can't afford it. These houses they were talking about were built in the 20s and 30s, that back in 1985 when the coal mine shut down, that they couldn't sell for $15,000 or $16,000. They haven't done anything to them, and now they're worth $220,000, $230,000. None of them meet code. And what you had is you got, and I don't want to get on the apple crate, but I have to deal with this every day. You got, you went from having coal miners and ranchers and loggers build these houses, and they did the best they could. And there wasn't any rules. We built them to try to last. And now all of a sudden, we want to bring them up to 2003 or 2011 or 2018 code. It's not going to happen. It can't happen. You have to have a certain amount of things grandfathered. And if this lady over here wants to build a fence where there's an existing fence, she shouldn't have to be able to get a permit to do it. As long as it suits her and her neighbor, shouldn't be any money involved. She'd be able to go down to where James works and buy the materials as long as it's done in a wood-type manner. You shouldn't have to give a permit to do it. You shouldn't have to get a permit to replace a tall. You shouldn't have to get a permit to replace a door. I'm flipping a house right there on 3rd Street now. I want to move a wall or two, but I will not do that because if I do, and I open that wall up, everything in that wall is going to be brought up to the new code. Electrically, plumbing, and any structural deals that's in there. And everybody's going to come look, and all these inspectors are like, I don't even say this because we're on live stream, they're like on fire. They got a gun, they got a bullet, and if you challenge them for anything, and you can ask my son, when the inspector shows up, I leave. Because although I have the right to bring salary, I don't have the ability. I just have to go. Because if I open my mouth, we are not going to pass that inspection. It's not going to happen. So you've got a big issue in Hotchkiss and Cedar and find some old builder that knows the laws, knows how to make stuff right, that's gonna maybe then work with these people to get their houses done, to bring them up to, maybe you can't make them be code, but make them better and look better without having to pay them a fortune.
And that is exactly the kind of thing that we are looking at.
Neil Black was like that. I mean, he, might not have been perfectly decoded, but he could see that it was better than it was. And building inspectors have a lot of discretion. And a lot of times when you get an inspector that has experience in the building trade, they can make that determination. They don't have to have everything sent to an engineer or an architect for planning.
And better than it was, sometimes the best
Yeah,
people for.
sometimes it's the best thing to do.
How do you turn that permit or have to go out a plan to build a 6x8 deck is ludicrous?
Engineer drawing for a 6x8 porch.
Yes.
Soil samples.
Yeah, so what I think, one way to look at it is, Peonia is a very eclectic little community. And I know there are some people who are very popular with some people in office right now who have actually stood up in this room and called us a poor, decrepit little town. And there are people on the board who consider this to be a junky little town. And I don't understand why they moved here. And I think there's a movement to gentrify this community. And I resent the hell of it. I really prefer a decrepit little town that's for real. So when it comes to splitting the hairs on it, doing all this stuff, I think that the reality is we are a very eclectic little community in the middle of the county with no rules at all. And we gotta have some space here.
Thank you. Yes.
I just to add my 2 cents to the recent conversation. One thing I noticed about Dan, I've dealt with him on a number of occasions for different projects, he is truly about the letter of the law rather than the intent. A town like this, in my mind, needs to have somebody that focuses on the intent, has a knowledge of the letter of the law, but is in the capacity to accommodate the situation so that, for all the reasons mentioned, okay, it keeps the cost down to the homeowner. As a simple example, in terms of this community, the setback for that, the biggest issue I have with the setback that was suddenly required for my workshop was that I was going to lose dirt, plain and simple, because 10 feet back from the alley, that's just going to be the entry to the double doors of the workshop from the alley. I can't plant there at that point. And I told my builder that, and that's when he, looked over the building and he said, I think I can renovate the place. But the whole idea of forcing somebody to take a 195 square foot building that has been there since 1913, right up against the property line at the alley, and say, well, if you want to tear it down and make it nicer, you're going to have to set it back, and again, Dan's told me 10 feet. Suzanne indicated 5.
Accessory building, like this, that's
Right. Again, all these details get lost in the shuffle. Nobody here gets to hear about it. We're all dealing with it on an individual basis. And my goal was to save my backyard to the greatest extent possible so I can continue to grow stuff there. But there's a lot of people in town that do that.
Look, I dealt with this enough, you stirred around the laws. You had 2 options there. If you tore everything down except the frame and built, and you didn't tear the frame down, if you turned it around, then you have to apply those new laws. If you don't tear it completely down and leave the framework and build around it, you build back right where it was. Or you tore it clear down and you could build something on skids and skidded it in there, and said, this is not a temporary, this is a temporary building, it's not permanent. I can move this if I need to. That's the 2 options you have.
Right, I was given that information from the builder.
Well, then, that's your option.
Right.
To abide by the law. I stirred around these laws.
Well, my original point when I was discussing this, Dan first told me said is, something that changed.
Yeah.
So there's no lack of consistency.
Yeah.
I had one problem, well, I had a lot of problems, but the one problem that I had also is I ended up spending $3,000 more than I should have. The state and, the people who built the Skyline home that I have, you know, they suggested that the supports underneath the ground appears every 8 foot. I had a friend of mine who's a geologist look at the ground and he said, yeah, that's perfectly fine, it's like clay and I don't know what it is, but anyway, so that was the recommendation of the Colorado State inspector, inspection people and this geologist. So then Dan goes and tells this one gal who's I don't know if she's some kind of architect or something, or engineer, she's an engineer. All of a sudden, they put the support 6 foot apart underneath, 3 foot deep and 6 foot apart. And those ended up costing me, the difference between 8 foot apart and 6 was $3,000. And that's 3 months' salary for me, you know? Yes. Well, some woman wrote me a letter saying, you have to get this done and, and I said, well, it's already been done, so it's required by the town. So I just went ahead and said, well, I don't need you. But she sent me a bill anyway and said she'd done it and then
Was it Lucy Hunter?
yeah.
That was someone from the town?
Lucy Hunter, she's an engineer, but she's also on the planning commission, and have these close relationships with the building inspector, and then be making decisions on the planning commission too, is a little odd.
And she wanted me to say
I'm
that.
actually gonna go ahead and jump in here, and I don't want to shut anybody down, we can come back to this. But since we are an hour in, I'd like to switch gears just a little bit for brief time. First, I want to summarize where we're at, make sure I'm understanding what we've heard today. So, we have issues with consistency, we have major concerns about the cost. We have concerns that the requirements are too much for our town in particular. And we need to find a way to work with what we have rather than strictly the code.
Yeah, certain codes seem to be inappropriate for a small community.
And can I just interject, Michelle? Remember that the electric code and the plumbing code is administered by the state.
Right.
So those are 2 other permits you have to get. So, yeah.
I don't think anybody's about those.
No, they're actually fairly reasonable, and when you think of safety, I mean, plumbing and electric is really highly regulated, so Dan is only doing the building portion.
So I feel like we have a very second on things that people feel like we should overhaul. What I'd like to hear is, if we're doing a major overhaul, let's say we're starting over on how Stanley does building inspection, what are we doing now that you don't want to do anyway in terms of building inspection? Or if you had your wish list of this is what the process will look like, tell us what that looks like. So any feedback on that would be great.
Yeah, that might take some thought on my part.
What we're doing right now,
Well, I think looking at other cities, I mean, Denver has actually, they have a terrific, their fee schedule is really clear.
Yeah.
It's 2 pages, it's really simple. And the fees are reasonable.
Yeah, I was in Denver 5 years ago, and at that time, I can't tell you what it is now, but I would suspect that it hasn't changed. But I called regarding putting in a privacy fence to see if I needed to get a permit, have the property line surveyed, so on and so forth. They said, no. As long as it's 6 feet or under, you're good, just put it in. I said, well, what if I breach the property line? He says, that's between you and the homeowner next to you. They just,
That's when I first met Dan. I was on the board, and I was curious how Delta did their fences, and he said, we don't have anything to do with fences down here, between, we don't, and we were advised by the attorney not to get into it, because, they didn't want to get the town sued, it's a civil issue between the property owners.
Yeah.
So,
I think generally, isn't that
yeah.
true across the state?
Yeah, but technically, the building code only, covers, they're only regulating fences over 6 feet in the international building code.
Right.
And the town has its own fence
But to
ordinance.
go back to Michelle's point,
Yeah.
what do we want to see different?
Yeah.
The fee structure definitely has to change. It needs to be simpler, it needs to be more streamlined. When a contractor or a homeowner calls for an inspection, they need an inspection, and they need it that day, the next day. They can't wait 2 weeks, and then if they fail, they can't wait another 2 weeks. It doesn't work for contractors. They will not work in this town, and so you're gonna get a bunch of fly-by-night, blah, blah, blah. So the process needs to be streamlined, the inspections need to be a lot faster, the consistency of whatever needs, the consistency of how the rules are applied needs to apply to everybody the same. There needs to be arbitration. There needs to be a group or a board or somebody that will listen to these problems and solve them.
And do it in a timely manner.
Yes. And this situation, I mean, we need to deal with this situation as quick as possible and get moved on to changing this. Because it's just not working.
No, we're shooting ourselves in the foot as long as we continue this. As far as what you're doing, well, having this today.
This is the first good thing that the family's done when it comes to the building department.
You know, this is very admirable.
Looking at, see if we can kind of be more in line with our surrounding communities to make sure that we're not like out in left field somewhere. And I don't know.
Well,
It's an attractive place for people to come who are the same kind of, morals and values of hard work and enjoying the life that we have here without a lot of, I don't know, like these old houses are great. They have,
We have to do like cleansing on our houses. I mean, let's see diversity. We all talk about diversity in this world, but I think we're having this generic thing. Those are just creating generic, situations.
Well, yeah, what we're talking about, we're all looking for some kind of balance.
Yeah.
What we're not seeing.
The housing code was put in, and the reason family adopts them is so, if you had a property in town, your neighbor couldn't come up and put a pig lot in the back of the house.
Right.
Or could build some kind of high school. It has to be built somewhat reasonable structure to protect your property value.
Yeah.
And that being said, it's all to protect each other. But that being said, there has to be a reason.
Yeah.
There needs to be a community standard.
I think a lot of it has to do with the density. You have a lot of people living close together, so you're thinking about safety, but we're not Chicago, we're not New York City. People are living on top of each
And that's why
other.
we're here.
And they probably never will.
Well, one thing that I think that helped me, when I had like this cold one or spring or whatever, I said, look, I'm looking at doing this project. When you get a minute, could you come down here and go through this with me? Here's what I want to do here, here's what I'm thinking about here, can I do this, can I do that? Instead of drawing out a bunch of papers, putting a bunch of applications in, here's what I'd like to do, what do you think? And here's what I'd like, the way I'd like to try to do it, can I do this? And they go through, yes, no, what can I do here? And I get some kind of an idea, sometimes before you bought a house.
yeah.
And they say, look, this is what you have to do, this is what you can't do, I'll work with you on this. But instead of, you get like a pre-inspection where you got some kind of an idea, where we go here, what's this gonna cost me? Instead of having to put all this paper, and fill out all these applications and all these drawings and stuff, and you don't know what to buy. And you don't know what the hell you're gonna go with.
That's huge.
And somebody
That's huge.
Somebody has some bedside manner that you could actually talk with, like another human being, that could talk to a professional builder or somebody that's never built a fence before, with the same type of respect. Here's what you can do, here's what you can't do.
There is no reason that somebody should be afraid of the building inspection.
Dan Renner came by my place about 3 years ago, and he said, I wouldn't have let you do your paint job and your siding first, before you did the roof on that back porch. because you're gonna need to flash that roof, and I'm gonna have you cut the siding and insert on the back of the house and insert flashing to flash that back porch. And I'm like, no way, I went on my sheer strength in that house. He goes, oh no, that porch carries it. I know how my porch is built. It's post and beam, 4-foot spacing between these posts. And then they said, I wouldn't do that. There's other ways to put on flashing. And then he kind of relented, but he goes like over the top with these suggestions.
Look, he was a roofer, that's his profession.
Okay.
When you go to put a roof on, it's gonna be done a certain way. I put a couple roofs on for him. And it had to be flashed the way he wanted it, not the way I wanted it, the way he wanted it.
There's more than one way to skin a cat, especially when you're...
I just did it the way you wanted it, and you got it.
Yeah. Anyway.
What's next on your list?
Sorry.
No, this is all great. This is back to your original.
You got problem with housing anyway. If I pick a lot out here somewhere in town, somebody wants $50,000, $60,000 for it, okay? And then you're $20,000, $25,000 for a water tap. And then if you want gas brought in, that's gonna cost you $5,000 or $6,000. Electricity's gonna cost you a couple thousand to get in. And then if you hook on the sewer, that's gonna cost you a couple thousand. For the septic tank, that's about $10,000. All right, we spent $100,000 here, and I haven't poured any concrete in, okay? And then you gotta go through this loophole with all these building inspectors, and they only work certain days.
You're going to before you pour up your...
Yeah, look, I'm gonna say, whoa, I'm gonna go out here on Stewart Mesa, or I'm gonna go up here on 50 Mesa, and I'm gonna buy a chunk of ground up here where I do what the hell I want to, and all I gotta worry about is plumbing and electrical inspections.
Yeah, there's a house later.
So what I'm assuming is like in that fee structure where it has two different things about inspections are $50 an hour, and then there's something inspections outside of normal business hours of $50 an hour. Maybe they're like normal business hours, which is 2 days a week, and you know, like for instance, if you got a guy that was inspecting plastics, he'd come up here on the same day, so we're not paying $90 every time he travels to Peonia, like we are for the Danbury. But the thing is, so the inspections outside, if it's like a really odd request, he can still show up, but that, there might be a charge. I'm just throwing out, I don't know.
I've had to wait for a week to somebody come look and how deep a hole I was for later on. It's got to be 18 inches deep, or a deck's got to be 36 inches deep. I can't take a picture of a tape in that since the guy...
Yeah, there is a plumbing inspector that would do that. You can take a picture.
Right, come on, we'll do that. But I didn't trust you, no, I gotta see it. And I had to wait 5 days for somebody to come out and look how deep it is.
And we're looking at that too, doing inspections virtually as well. So, you know, everything is on the table, so we certainly appreciate you bringing all that up.
It needs to be an easier process for the people building, for the people trying to make the community look better. Sure.
And Leonard, to go back to something you mentioned earlier, we are going to have another one of these sessions specifically on affordable housing. These listening sessions are going to continue. If you have ideas for things you want to talk about, email Corinne. She's just constantly adding to it. We're going to keep adding sessions like this.
So the guy with the karate studio here, and his wife owns the liquor store, he was gonna build some, like multi-family housing out by the liquor store. And after they finished with Van Reardon and the work that he did on his liquor store and that, surprise expenses that came up, he said, that's it, I'm not building this. So that's what you're looking at. I mean, people use it makes it too expensive, and people don't want to deal with it.
But if they assess the whole fee inspection, and he's charging for fees that weren't part of the original inspection fee on this thing that I've had, I was like, everything's typed out, you know?
It's not Dan's fault, really. It's something he works on.
Ask this question a different way. Do you see a reasonable time limit for some sort of resolution to these situations?
Well,
I really can't say until...
I mean, is this going to drag on for 2 years?
No.
I don't think so.
This is something that we're actively working on, by...
I mean, is it going to be front burner work session?
It is, and actually, Corinne she has major input on this as well, and unfortunately, she was sick and unable to attend. But, you know, I think, that we certainly have to go back to her. We have to talk with the board and get, there's a lot of information that we need to, get from our local communities as well.
I haven't heard other things this room says about the current situation.
So basically, James.
And that's why we're here.
We're not dodging the question, we
Right.
can't give you a hard answer because we can't speak for the rest of the.
I understand. I'm just understanding the point that this needs to be resolved.
Yeah.
And
It's not down at the bottom of the
the
list.
town has a bad habit of dragging this stuff out and allowing bad behavior to continue and continue and continue until somebody gets sued, and I won't see that.
Well,
I don't think
that's
you do.
good. It's not going fast enough to get a crowd at a town hall meeting and put pressure on all the trustees. But you guys will make recommendations, which is awesome, that you've taken the time to listen.
And we will, we'll make what comes out of this,
Yeah.
we'll make recommendations to the board, you should see that coming.
And thank you guys for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Absolutely.
Any other comments, anyone like to make?
No, aside from the international building codes that we follow, are supposed to be behind at the clerk's desk, and you can come in and inspect it at any reasonable hour.
Yeah.
It's a 2003 code, and none of the libraries carry 2003, and I don't know how soon you're gonna change it, but the 2003 code, seriously, if you buy it on Amazon Music, it costs $5. And if you do the 2018 code, it's gonna cost $150 or maybe $200. And there's,
It just changed.
yeah, so,
Does anybody know that the 2018 code, is that one that was derived from the European building code?
they're all international.
Okay.
Yeah, the UBC ended at the end of the 90s. Yeah. So, you know, I know there's some trustees that say, well, it's not good enough, but you know, their houses were built by the 2003 code and their houses are fine. I don't know, Dan, you know, there's certain things like sprinkler systems and then also, I just want to say, Dan was encouraging you to, adopt the mechanical code and the fuel gas code separately. They're different volumes. But if you look at the International Building Code, those are contained in that code. They're just maybe 20 pages shorter each. So the thing is, if you have to get a separate permit for the fuel gas permit, and you have to get a separate permit for this, and you have to get your building permit, that's also going to drive the cost up. So why not just use the codes that are contained within and not get too fancy about adopting more codes?
Yeah.
Let's throw this baby out with the bathwater.
Unless there's a separate inspector, there shouldn't be a separate charge for it.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you guys for listening.
no, we will certainly take all your comments and concerns,
Look,
review those.
every town's different.
Yeah.
I didn't work in Crawford. Nobody what kind of need Crawford. Hopkins is different, what family was, Cedars is different, Delta is different.
Yeah.
Grand Junction, you have one inspector. You don't have state inspectors, you don't have state electrical, you don't have state money, you got one inspector.
Really?
He comes up and he inspects everything, yep. And if you're lucky, he's a roofer, you can do anything you want. It's crazy. I don't know why they don't follow the state decision, but they don't.
Having an inspector that people feel comfortable with and they don't feel like they're coming up against hardness or too much strictness, it encourages people to come on board.
And you always think about this, you know, building inspector, it's a part of the job. But that's really our issue.
Yeah, you know, if you guys look at working relationship with him, I'm not a professional builder. I'm like, what can I do here? How would you fix this? Here's what I was gonna do.
You're still gonna have a guy who just thinks that they don't want to do anything, that they're being forced.
Look, I put my house in that town, I go somewhere else, and I'm.
There you go.
So I just want to thank everybody for coming today.
Thanks a lot. do setback, and then we build, and then we say, well, I want to move this little garage shed, over here on the property, and then I was told, no, you can't do that. So at that point, we jacked the whole building like 5 feet. And I put it on the counter, and then it fell over the wind, and we pulled it back up again. It was so funny, but it's too bad I got to use the whole thing around. But I said, it's a really sweet little building, it's really cute. And the lady across the street, lost the battle.
Well, that's exactly how I do it with my workshop.
Yeah.
I hired Yearman, who was kind of Midwest.
Yeah.
Actually, his education is in architectural design and engineering. So, I mean, the way he
Find it.
supports that